Hi there, and welcome to the HR podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I'm here with my co-host and friend, Cyndi Manuel. How are you today?
Hello, I am freezing. I'm in my office and it is like the coldest room in the whole house, but this is where my office is and I have a window and I can see the sunshine, so it's worth it. So I'm all tucked in with a blanket and good to go. Yes.
Nope,
How
that's
are
good.
you?
I know. I'm good. You know, it is crazy weather. I'm so comfortable with the temperature in Colorado right now. I'm like this 48, 50 degrees. It's awesome. It's a little cold in the morning, and I would like it if the sun didn't go down quite so early because
At
I'm like,
4:30.
when do I walk my dogs, right? Because it's like too dark in the morning and a little too cold, and then it gets dark so fast. So trying to find time to get out there and do it. But
Yes.
no, I'm doing good. We're getting spoiled because winter's going to be a coming. So
Yeah. I'll
yeah,
wait.
no, oh, I know.
I'll
Me
wait.
too. Me too. Not in a big hurry for it. And
Yeah.
I was tired of the heat, so I was ready. But then I'll start complaining about it being cold pretty soon too. So
Ah,
that's the way it
yeah.
worked. Can you
Yes.
believe that Christmas is like almost here? I mean, that's so
No,
crazy to me.
I am in
Yeah,
denial. The year's going by way too fast.
way
My
too fast.
birthday is at the very end of the year. And so I always sort of put the skids on just a little near the end of the year like this. Yeah.
Absolutely, no. Yeah, those end of the year birthdays, sure. I mean, I guess the good thing is, like, it feels like you get to be younger for longer, right? So, it's
Sure.
the whole year
Yes.
there,
I
so
like that. Yes.
yeah.
You
I like
betcha.
that too.
I'll take that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way to well, with the new year upon us, we thought we'd do
Right?
an episode just to talk a little bit about 2025 strategic priorities. And just so happens that Gartner just recently put out an ebook talking about the strategic priorities for chief human resource officers. And they've also got like the 5 priorities that they're seeing around HR, CHROs, which it's kind of fascinating to me. I don't know about you, but when I was looking at it, I'm like, what changed? Like, other than AI, I suppose, but I'm like, nothing has really changed. There's so much, like, I guess it just goes to
They're
show that we have so
similar.
much work to do, right?
Right, exactly. Very similar though. You're absolutely right. I think I kind of take from it is a little more intense in 2025. I feel like,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
maybe AI is part of that. Do you think, Linda, like
Maybe.
there's more
Yeah.
data?
Yeah.
People are, digging into AI a bit more. And so I think it almost sort of highlights even further, like the labor market and what they're going through and,
Yeah. Yep.
change and, what that means for leaders and
Yeah.
organization. Like it almost is like an exclamation point because you're right. 2024, maybe
Yeah.
even 2023, some similarities for sure. But I feel
Definitely
like
some
it's like, ah,
similarities.
yeah,
Yeah. No, and that's a really great way to put it. I think you're right, is maybe it is more intense. And maybe what we're starting to see is a greater focus on leadership, paying attention to issues that maybe those of us who've been in the industry for a long time have been saying maybe leadership should pay a little bit more attention to some of these things around like strategic labor,
Yes.
workforce management, and really looking at change and HR organization or the role that HR plays in organizational
Mhm.
transformation as well. And I think maybe what we're starting to see is that leadership seems to be a little more in tune to that, and I'm not sure what's driving that. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but I'm happy for it if it means that we can see maybe some big shifts in the upcoming years. So
Yeah, I think some of it is necessity too, right? Because
good
you've
point.
got
Yeah.
so many people are retiring or
Yes.
leaving, the corporate workforce.
Right.
It's interesting. I've seen a lot on LinkedIn recently about people
Yes.
semi or retiring, and it's like, good for
So true.
you. I'm very jealous. That's
I
awesome.
know. Me too. Me too. I'm very,
Yeah,
very jealous. Yeah, I know I saw our friend Mike Race recently is semi-retired. So I'm like,
yeah.
shout out to Mike. Good for you. That's awesome.
And I've seen more and more of that, honestly. So I
Yeah.
think
No,
it's,
it's true.
there's a lot of different things that are driving just kind of again that more intense need for these
Could very well
priorities.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so just kind of to highlight for our listeners, and we're happy to share the link out to the Gartner in the show notes, but a few of the things that they highlighted as far as like the three major trends that they called out in this ebook are around AI aspirations versus deployment realities,
Mm,
CEOs prioritizing growth through transformation, and then
yep.
labor market shifts and their impact on the talent strategies. So those are kind of the three biggies that are out there. So I don't know, Cindy, you want to talk a little bit about the importance of HR in organizational growth? I mean, because I know that's a big area that you've worked in for such a long time. So love to get your insights around that.
Yeah, you know what's so cool? I actually just had a conversation with a client today, and they have, their PMO, their project management office. They all, as a part of that, they've got their um, organizational development. They have
Okay.
workforce readiness, and they have change management, and they all kind of work hand in
Ah,
hand. Which I was like, that's
yeah.
pretty smart on your guys'
Yeah,
part.
that is.
And so I think there is more and more of a focus on that. Oh, and they all work very collaboratively with the HR department. So
Yes.
again, kind of going back to what kicked us off, 6 months or so ago on this podcast was, the strategic nature of HR. Like it's important to do all the things that HR needs to do to keep their organizations compliant and things of that nature, people paid and benefits and, all the reasons that we all come to work. But also on top of that is a much more strategic or sort
Mm,
of, higher level focus. And so on things like, you know, all these three things, AI has been such a
yeah.
big focus this year, right? I mean, you did something on AI at Aspire, didn't you, Linda?
Yeah, we did at our annual users conference talking a little bit about the role that AI is playing in all of that.
Mm.
And it's a big topic of conversation. It'll be interesting to see how this impacts us in 2025 and beyond. And it kind of ties to what Gartner is talking about as well as AI reality versus, it's actual the implementation around it. What's real
Yes.
about all of that? And a lot of the conversation was this fear that's coming from the idea that perhaps leaders and senior leaders might have this misconception that AI is going to replace people. And we heard that a lot. And I think, that's going to be the interesting component of how we
Yeah.
look at the AI piece of it. And I think that was a little bit of what, Gartner was talking about on aspirations versus reality. Like the labor
Yeah.
shortage is not going to be solved by AI, right? So,
Absolutely not. It's one way to make us all more efficient so that we can focus on other things, right, that are more
yeah.
strategic. But it's just one way when it comes to that.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. No, it's really fascinating. And what I love too is we are seeing, so I saw it in both Gartner's top three strategic priorities, but also in their top five priorities for HR
Mhm.
leaders. In both cases, change management was involved in in those discussions as well. But
Yeah.
another piece that came out that I read in that I'm curious to get your thoughts on is there's a lot of change fatigue, though, that's happening for employees. Like, employees are really
Seriously.
feeling the yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
maybe talk a little bit about that because that's your area of expertise.
when I first started in change management, I mean, back in 2007, at the city and county, but then I went and started doing consulting in 2012. When I would go in and I would start to do a organizational readiness. How ready are you for this change? What I was hearing from organizations by and large was we have this is the major change. We're moving
Yeah,
to a new payroll system, new timekeeping system, a new scheduling system, that or a new HR system. That is our
right.
major change. We have a couple of other changes here and there. Now it is uncommon, like, I don't hear from clients at all anymore that this is the big change. It's
Yeah,
a change, and
yeah.
then I ask people it's funny because 'cause I've been doing a lot of these readiness assessments recently, and
Uh-huh.
one of the questions is, "What keeps you up at night? Are you worried about this change?" And you know what I keep hearing is, "No, we're not worried," because we're getting pretty good at change because change is happening all the time. But what that means to me
Interesting.
is a couple of things. The first thing is these are typically like high level to mid-level
Mhm.
leaders because these changes aren't there's not an awareness across the organization.
Right,
Typically
yeah,
the people they have me talk to first are the leaders. So one of the
sure.
things that I think is, gosh, it's great that you think that. I
Yeah.
seriously doubt that's how your front line is feeling about
Yep,
things.
absolutely,
So
yes.
let's come back around and do some pulse checking. But also I do think it's becoming, I don't want to say a necessary evil, but I do think people are becoming, I don't know if they're becoming more comfortable with it. I would be really interested
Mhm.
to hear what other people have to say about that, but they're becoming
Me
more used
too.
to it. It's kind of like in the pandemic,
Yeah,
right? At the beginning, it was like, oh my gosh. But the longer it
right.
went, it sort of became the way, kind of became our new normal. I kind of feel like
It's
this is
true.
organization's new normal is there's just
Yeah,
constant change, and it's
it's a
not
really good
technology all
point.
the time either. So,
No, it's not. Well, and that was what was interesting is that in the Gartner paper, they said that CEOs set their sights on growth through transformation and that 62% is based on
mm,
growth, 33% is about technology. So that is
right?
really interesting. And it said, like, so some of the changes, and I'm just reading this over here, changes at the core of new era business strategy shifts where they still do have digitalization and technology. That's always going to be a part, right?
Always,
Because
for
technology
sure.
is constantly changing.
Yeah.
Resilience and agility, customer needs,
Yes.
product and pricing, growth rate focus, sustainability and environmental social governance, so the
Yeah.
ESG, AI, obviously profitability, efficiency, automation, productivity, and cost management. So those were kind of like the core of what was driving all of that. But was really interesting is so much of it. It says that CEOs are preparing their strategy for a new era, and 79% of CEOs will have their post crisis business strategy ready by the end of
Mm,
2024. That was kind of interesting. So maybe some
interesting.
of this is it triggered by the pandemic and the reality of the impact to
The long
business that
term.
yeah, and how long it took for many businesses to recover after the pandemic, because they weren't prepared.
Yes. And as a result of that too, I think, and you're probably seeing this in your business as well, and all the mergers, acquisitions, and when you
Yep.
try to bring companies together, you might
Mhm.
think and want to believe that the cultures are going to align, but it's like
Yep.
you're going to bring these two organizations, even if you merge. I was talking
Yep.
to somebody else in HR at another organization, and she said, "We're calling it a combination. We're not calling it a
Oh,
merger." And I
okay.
thought
All
that's a
right.
really interesting way to
That
sort
is
of
an
frame it up.
interesting.
so that,
Yes.
and truly the way they're doing it is more like a combination. It's like, okay, what works well? What has worked well for your organization?
Mhm.
What works well for ours? Let's figure out, which bits and pieces to sort of combine. But again, change fatigue. It's like, you
Oh
know,
gosh, yeah. Yeah,
oh,
it's so hard.
here's one
I
more
mean,
thing.
we merged 4 years ago. I mean, we're in our I think going into our 5th year, right,
Oh my
since, we
goodness.
became UKG. Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy?
Yeah.
Because we actually, it was right after we announced our merger, Kronos with Ultimate Software to become UKG.
Mhm.
We then I think a month later, the global pandemic occurred, and so it's been that much time. But the interesting part about all of that is here we are many years later, and we're still sorting through all of that because to your
Yeah.
point, even though you had 2 companies that were very similar, and even similar in culture, from
Yeah.
an arm's length, right? If you were looking at the outside and you go, "Wow, those companies operate very similarly." But when you really get into it, no, they were 2 very different people cultures and
Mhm.
business, cultures as to how you operate. You can love your people and they can love you, but that does not mean that that's the culture of the organization. And so
Yeah.
I love the idea of the combination
Yeah.
because it is a best of both. And how do you then bring that together to find the right way forward? So,
Yeah, and I mean, at the leadership level, kinda going back to leaders, right? Then how do you came from, one company, I came from another company. How do we
mhm.
align? How do we work
Oh gosh,
together?
yeah,
Because if
yeah,
our, staff, if our team members don't see us trying to align,
yeah,
then that's gonna be the undoing of whatever you're trying
absolutely.
to change or transform,
No,
so.
it is so true. I totally agree with you. And
Mhm.
it is going to be really interesting to see kind of like what's going to happen. So, some of the related to AI, part of what Gartner pulled out as far as like the AI aspirations confront deployment realities, they said on average, business leaders expect a 22.6% improvement in functional productivity in the next
Mm,
12 to 18 months by using Gen AI. Feels a little lofty to me, but Gartner put together kind of like a little curve, chart in that saying the innovation
I
trigger, so
saw that.
everybody loves that, right? Everybody I think we talked about that on the episode we did on AI, how quick it was for AI to be adopted versus, like, all the other
It's
technologies
not
before
going
that.
away. Yes.
Not going away, and so now they're kind of showing, like, this big peak, and now we're kinda coming down into the valley, right? And they're calling that the trough of disillusionment, which I like,
I
and
do
they said,
too.
right, that was good, and they said
Uh-huh.
that some of the challenges were around data issues, uncertainty about
Yeah.
best practices, the skill gap, and then change fatigue, because along these same lines, I think that there was, this belief that employees just automatically knew how to use AI, and I know in my experience, I had to learn it's all about the prompts, right? So it
Yes.
doesn't if you don't know how to put the prompts in, you're not gonna get the
Yeah.
right data out, you might as well just do a Google search, and so it's kind of interesting, and then a lot of people are concerned about the data, right? The data issues and
Data
even
integrity and uh-huh.
ethics behind it,
Right.
right? The
Yep.
security, all of
Fact
those components,
checking and
so
all of it. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And
Yeah, so
everything,
it's gonna be
all new
interesting.
technology and current technology is starting to
Yeah,
incorporate, AI into, their technology,
yes.
which is smart. You have to do like, it's
It
not
is,
going anywhere.
yeah.
So,
No,
but,
it's not. I mean, I love it, conceptually, I think it's a great I think I've joked before, it's the best admin assistant I've ever had. I mean, it's the only admin assistant I've ever had, but it's definitely the best one, and, I like it for a lot of reasons, but I'm also realistic in the fact that that is exactly what it is. It's an assistant to me.
that's
It
right.
hasn't replaced anything about my job or what I'm doing, but it has provided me with some assistance, and even in problem solving, it gives some really great ideas and
I
thoughts,
was gonna say
around that.
brainstorming
Yeah,
or yeah,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
if we use it in the right context and we maybe slow it down a little bit, that'll be important because I do think there's this leadership belief that somehow AI is going to solve the labor crisis, but I don't think it is. So,
I do think also that, individual contributors are excited
yes,
and wary at the same time, right?
I think you're right.
I can use it to help me in my job to brainstorm ideas, especially if,
Yeah.
I'm a remote worker working from home. I'm
Gosh,
not
yeah. Yeah.
interacting with my team as much as I used to, even in a hybrid
Yeah.
environment, right?
Yeah.
However, then on the other side, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how is this going to replace me? So I do
Absolutely.
think there's there's a lot of
Mm,
dynamic there. So I do love
there
how
is.
they said, we had this peak of inflated expectations, which
Yes.
was great. That's when I was like, hey, I've got these 6 things in my refrigerator. What should I make for dinner? And so I was like, oh, this thing's super cool. And then we
Yes.
go down to the trough of disillusionment. I love that. So
Yeah, I love that too. It was such a great visual. And I think what happens sometimes when we get too caught up in the hype of something before we really have all of the information, right?
that
So, yeah,
pendulum
that's
swings, right? Mhm.
yeah, and it is kind of hard, I think, sometimes when you do see such a big push upward and then such a steep decline, it's harder then to kind of bring it back up, right? Because now you've
Mm,
also along the line lost a little bit of trust from employees and organizations. So now
yeah.
it takes a little bit more time to kind of get everybody back in the swing of it. So
And,
yeah.
a year from now, we'll be talking about AI and it will be like no big deal. Maybe, I don't know.
Yes, yeah,
But
maybe, yeah, I know, it will be
yeah,
interesting a year from today when we come back and we're looking to predict what's happening or talk about what's happening in 2026 to
2026.
hear
Yeah.
yeah, to hear what's going on, so no, it'll be really interesting. Now the other big thing that they talked about was the labor market shifts putting pressure on the talent short strategies, and in that it
Mhm.
said that there are 3 drivers of declining availability of critical talent, and that 61% of talent management leaders agree that the demands on talent management exceed their capacity to deliver. And so, through the 3 things that they called out were the labor shortage. Globally, more than 85 million jobs are projected to go unfilled by 2030, which is just mind
Isn't
blowing
that
to me.
crazy? Yes.
Oh my goodness. Mismatched skills. 23% of global jobs will change in the next 5 years due to industry transformation, including AI. And then the third one is employee expectations. That 62% of candidates say they will only apply for jobs that meet the majority of their EVP requirements. And so, I do think that those three things are really telling. And it's interesting because that mismatched skills kind of goes back to what we've been talking about, since we started the podcast, is around skills assessment, the role that
That's
HR
right.
needs to play in all of that. So I hope in all of this that what we're also seeing is that HR is getting invited to the table as they're thinking about all of this, right?
Absolutely, as an advisor and to
Yeah.
provide guidance and,
Yeah.
to be a brainstorming partner. I think it's so what was really interesting to me just generally about all of this, Linda,
Yeah.
is I was looking through these 2 reports by Gartner, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is kinda cool," because we have spoken with a lot of experts,
Yeah.
and thought
Yeah.
leaders in
Yeah.
these areas, right? So when we talk about talent, I go back to Ali Mercier and,
Yes.
looking at and her telling us about, even when you go to apply, and I told my daughter-in-law this the other day, we were having a conversation. I was like, if you're looking for something different, um, don't just apply to the ones that just you tick all the boxes.
Yes. Yeah,
Apply to the ones
exactly.
where there's a good fit, but there's some really good transferable skills that you've got too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
hopefully more is gonna happen around that.
Yep.
And then also, I was talking to my daughter the other day who's going to school for medical, and she was talking about what she wants to do, and we were talking about, or she said very smartly, I'll do that for maybe the first 5 years, and then
Uh-huh.
I'll probably do something different in the medical field, and I said, "And can you imagine how much more will be available job-wise,
Oh,
in the
yeah.
medical field in 5 years after you graduate," which her graduation is down the road. But it's
Oh,
incredible
yeah.
to me to think about all of that.
No. It is. It's crazy. It's just changing so much. And you're right. We've been very blessed this last year to have some really incredible guests. And you're right. We've hit on so many of these.
So
And
many.
one of the things that they also talk about in this is that CHROs have an opportunity to actually increase HR's influence. That's really one of the genesis of our podcast, right? Is to think
Yes.
about how can we help elevate that conversation for HR to really get that seat at the table, be viewed as those
Right.
strategic advisors, and really help. Because what was so disheartening to me as I read this is it said CEOs are overlooking HR to unlock the value of new investments, and that less than 1% of CEOs are relying most on their CHRO to unlock the value of even things like generative AI and balancing the
Mm.
benefits and risks. And I thought, wow, how
That's a
sad is
miss.
that?
That's a miss,
Yeah,
right?
that's a huge miss.
You and I talked
Absolutely.
about, is HR generally needs to
Yeah.
have more business acumen, needs to be,
Yeah.
educated on the finances, on the customers, right? Customers are so important
Yeah,
on, what the business is, what the products, the services, all of that. Even if you're
absolutely.
healthcare, they need better understanding and of the patient experience, and things of that
Mhm.
nature. So, if they do that, then CEOs have a partner in their
Yeah,
CHRO and their HR organizations or teams to be able to bring the people side of the equation to the table,
yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Well, and, that's what HR are the experts in, right, as people, and it always amazes me, like, I was kind of evaluating this situation the other day, and I was looking at this disconnect a lot of times that you see between, product teams, services
Mhm.
teams, pre-sales, and then sales, like, those are kinda like the 4 quadrants within a software company when you look at each of those. The problem is that they're all off working on these different things, and so but there's no cohesion between all of that, right? So we talk a
Alignment.
lot
Yeah.
about, yeah, we're missing in the alignment, and we talk a lot, like, the new terminology that we've used at our organization is about interlocking, right? So which is
Mm.
just another word for collaboration is really what it comes down to, but it's,
Yeah.
it sounds fancier to say interlocking, but as we come together for those things, but what's interesting to me is, like, HR could actually play a role in helping think through how do you come up with a way because I think all of those teams, it's not that anyone is saying, "Oh, I don't want to collaborate with those guys." They don't know
Do they
how
know?
to
Right.
necessarily, yeah, how do we bring that all together? So
Yeah.
why wouldn't you look to your HR people to come in and maybe help really kind of drive that and help support in those situations? But you
Absolutely.
really see that happen, right?
Yeah. I mean, and they're almost like the hub because if you don't have
Yeah,
your people, if you don't have your team, nothing gets accomplished. If they're not
exactly.
happy, if they're not productive, if it's not a psychologically safe environment, all the
Mhm.
things, right? And so they're sort of the hub, and then you have your spokes
Yeah.
in any business of the
Yeah.
various areas that all need to work together. But HR could be
Right.
such a great advisor and
Oh my
connector,
gosh. Yeah.
so it is a
And
miss
what's
when that
fascinating
doesn't
about that,
happen.
Cindy, is that
Mm.
what ends up happening then is they'll hire in third-party consulting firms, and, God bless the third-party consulting firms, but oftentimes they'll bring them in, and the expertise is in their own backyard, right? How many times I know for me, you and I used to have these conversations, I'm like, "If they would just ask us, like, we could
I
have told
hear
them
that
that for free."
all the
Right?
time. Yeah. So almost it's like, okay, so I'm envisioning this. It's, HR is at the hub, right? You've got your spokes and
Mhm.
those are your leaders who, make the decisions. However, to your point, great point, and I hear this all the time. Those spokes need to extend to the people doing the jobs
Yes.
on the
Yes.
daily, right? So what does a day in the
Absolutely.
life look like for you?
Right.
Share that with me. What are your frustrations? What are your, how could I support you? Then, your leaders bring that back to the table and talk,
Yeah.
with HR, with the other leaders in the organization. I mean, I'm making it sound much more simplistic because there's so much more that goes on behind the
I know
scenes,
it's
but,
hard, and
you
we
know,
we see a lot too, like the use of, survey tools, right? And I think, like, I love conceptually survey tools because it is hard to try to get a pulse, and in the world we live in today and the environments we are where
Yeah.
you've got like, I'm working from home, and so I'm not you can't just call me down to the conference room where we could all kinda get together and do a huddle.
Yeah.
So how do you find out how I'm feeling? Well, you do it through pulse surveys, but I do think that there's something to be said for in more in it's not always maybe in the survey tool. Maybe it is also creating small focus groups within your own organization to have those
Yeah.
because you in the virtual world we live in, that's very possible through Teams or Zooms or whatever,
Absolutely.
using.
Yes.
You can do that, but I think that we've lost sight because of the tools in maybe the human side of that as well, and that's
That
another area
connection.
where honestly HR could help in that regard in it not just being about this survey tool that gets pushed out. There's another layer to that. Like, let's now take that information and maybe we create small focus groups to kind of hone
Yeah.
in on some of those key things or
The
something like
topics and
that,
the
right?
themes that are
Yeah.
coming up, right?
Yeah.
The one caveat that I would make to that too is sometimes
Yeah.
HR are not the best people to go out and to conduct those because people, I think still
Yeah.
to this day, they're like, HR, I
Mhm.
can or maybe I
Don't
can't,
trust.
right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And
I
not that
agree.
they should or shouldn't, it's just the way that
No.
it kind of is. But where HR
Yep.
could be involved is to provide guidance, to provide coaching, to provide some leadership
Yeah.
development when it comes to, okay, guys, you need to have these conversations, these crucial conversations
Yes. Yeah.
with your team members. Here's some, conversation starters. Here's how you
Yeah.
approach it when someone is hesitant or resistant. Here's,
Absolutely.
different things to
Yeah,
enable
like,
those
how do you
leaders.
facilitate, right?
That's
Because a
right.
lot of us, like, if we don't know how to facilitate that conversation I mean, I think this is something you and I did exceptionally well at the city of Denver, is that we met with our team all the time and conducted focus groups. We met with other
Yeah,
parts of the organization all
we
the
did.
time to hear what was going on because that helped us then make the improvements that we needed, to apply to the different situations that were occurring, and we wanted to hear from our own team as well, right? So it's like it was one thing to go and talk to everybody else, but I thought we did a really great job of also talking to our own team and saying, "How is this working for you? Like, we didn't take you into consideration in this moment.
Yeah,
How is this affecting you?" And I do think that that's really critical if you're looking to build that real strong culture, I think it's important. So,
absolutely. And HR
yeah,
typically has their finger on the pulse. They know,
they do.
you've got
They
HR
do.
business partners who are dedicated to manufacturing, to, whatever
Yeah.
area of your organization, right? To R&D, to sales, to whatever, procurement, to all the various groups. So then they come back and they should be, collaborating with each other, and also highlighting here's some areas that we think, some higher touch by the leaders could be
Yeah.
really beneficial. And then again, coaching those leaders, giving them, the hard messages, or guidance, to be able
Right.
to say, hey,
Yeah.
if you could go back out, there's a little more love and care and feeding that needs to happen with your
No.
particular group.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
that is really because you do want the leaders to be involved, right? You don't get to just like we've always say, you don't want to just throw it off to HR and say, oh well, that's HR's responsibility, and then
Yes,
leadership is out. It definitely does have to be a collaborative effort right
that's
between the
right.
two. 'Cause, the HR can help with all of those things that you were just talking about, and then that also helps the leader grow and they learn and they get
Right.
better and stronger. And I think then you're really helping support the whole transformation for managers as well because we're seeing a lot around that too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And then kind of to come full circle with the labor,
Yep.
kind of challenges that are coming up and some of the strategies when
Yeah.
those leaders then go out to their supervisors or managers or frontline
Hmm.
staff and say, hey, tell me about a day in the life. Tell me some of your frustrations.
Yeah.
Then that can highlight areas that they could look at. Okay, we have some mismatched skills here. We have,
Yes.
some interesting employee expectations here. We have, some areas that AI could maybe help or other things, less
Yeah.
manual processes or whatever you want to look at can create some efficiencies so that people can do some things differently. kind of gives a different viewpoint on what does the organization need? What do each of the teams need? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Well, and just to kind of what the way that some recommended actions from our from Gartner to elevate HR's impact on organizational strategy. They talk about assess, and I love this because this aligns with all the things you and I have been talking about. But assess, which is think about the organization's big strategic bets and how HR can help enable their
Mm,
success, and then
yeah.
identify the talent risks that might impede these. And I think that to me is
Big.
such a critical piece that gets missed so frequently is
Yes.
I hear this all the time when we're out meeting with prospects and customers. They have these big strategic ideas around how they're going to do this, and they're going to buy that technology, and the technology is going to do all of that. And they've not done that piece, which is around assessing the talent to support the next strategic initiative that they have going.
Yes.
And how often do you see that in the organizations that you work with, even, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Great,
yeah,
great
I thought
point.
that was really,
And
yeah,
or is it an opportunity to grow one of your high performers into a
yeah.
role? We've talked previously about, just because you're a high performer doesn't mean you should go into management, right?
Exactly,
Sometimes
yeah.
yes, but not all the time. Is there an opportunity with a strategic initiative that the organization is looking at to bring in a group of high performers
Yeah,
and, to
absolutely.
set them up to be successful in growing in succession, right? Leadership.
Yeah. Yep,
So,
absolutely. No, it's a
yeah.
really good point. Well, and so the other thing they talk about is planning, right? So help the C-suite understand the human implications of strategic business decisions because oftentimes when we're thinking about business decisions, we're only thinking about it sometimes in dollars and cents, right? So you're thinking about how do we grow? How do we increase our bottom line?
Right.
We want to increase our sales, even increase our profits, whatever that is. And but we aren't always thinking about the implication on the human side. And then take an active approach to C-suite conversations about workforce productivity, because that's
Mm,
another thing. Workforces are really being stretched thin right now. They're being asked to do a lot with a little. And I think
mhm.
that you can do a lot more with a lot less when you have really good processes and structures in place to
Right.
begin with. But if you don't have that foundation and then you're asking your people to do more with less, that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. So,
That's just such a great point. And, how many times do you work with organizations? I know I do, where I say, so where are your processes?
yep.
Policies? Do you have things written down? And it's like, oh no, so and so, that's their practice. Um,
Yeah.
and it becomes a single source of failure as well, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
you're absolutely right. And once you have, I think too, and again, HR can help with this as well. I think as
Yeah.
a brain, like a thought partner, once you start to put stuff together, it's not the end
Yeah.
all be all. It'll continue to be
No.
refined, but at least having
Yep.
something, because then again, it highlights maybe where there are areas or vacancies that need to be really focused on when it comes to talent,
Exactly. Yeah.
and things like that. So yeah.
No, I totally agree. Well, and then the last thing that they had on there for actions were execute. So work with other functional leaders to augment HR
Mm,
roles to achieve shared goals and drive complementary value. And then define an HR operating model of the future for your organization that can help deliver on HR and business goals, which again is really kind of in alignment with what we've been talking about, is that strategic role of HR, right? And where
yeah.
they fit into of this,
How
and execution
exciting.
plans are the key, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How exciting and how scary all at the same time.
Oh my goodness,
You
right?
know?
I know, I
Let's
love
be
all of
real.
this stuff. Yeah, no, it's amazing, and I get so excited by it, and I love change, but I also am realistic, as I know you are as well, like, if change, is it's happening all the time, right? It's the only constant, but it's so critical to be thoughtful about what you're doing and your
That's right.
approaches and making sure you've got that strong foundation in place if you wanna have the success around that change, right?
Yeah,
So,
and taking care of people along the way and making sure that they
yeah,
feel they're gonna be set up for success and supported and, I think,
absolutely.
yeah, the time and energy and effort that leaders put into that, supported
Yeah.
by HR, I think is just a very good investment.
I think so too. I
Smart
think it's gonna
investment.
make a big difference, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I love, our guests, but I love us being able to spend time together and
We have some of the
do this.
coolest conversations, but it's
I think so too. No,
cool for the
I hope our
podcast.
listeners love it as well. But we just thought it'd be kind of interesting to just review Gartner for this one on these three. Cyndi and I are going to be looking at doing another episode to dive a little deeper into change because there's a lot that we want to kind of tap into that, especially knowing like we've now seen several reports where change keeps coming up, change management.
Which
So
I
I think,
love.
yeah, so who better to talk about that than Cyndi for sure. So I think
Aw,
that'll be really fun for us to have an episode to kind of dig in a little bit more on that as well. So
thank you. I look forward to that too. And it's always I love all the people that have come on. We've been so fortunate.
we
Um,
have
and I also love our conversations too. I mean, this is how
me
we started,
too.
right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know we always joke like every one of our conversations could be a
Could be a
podcast because
podcast.
we can't help ourselves. So it's like we just get so deep into to these things. But
We
I
do.
hope everybody has enjoyed this episode. Well, like I said, we'll put the link to Gartner, so feel free to go out there and dig a little deeper. There's some great charts and information that they
Yes.
have out there. And so it's a great resource. Gartner does do a lot with providing, I think, some excellent framework for leaders and certainly
Mhm.
for HR there. And clearly they're on the same quest we are, which is to elevate the role of human resources. So no, but
Thank you
well, we
so
hope
much for
everybody,
this
yeah.
time.
Oh my gosh, thank you. We hope everybody enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow and subscribe to our LinkedIn and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.